Before he became a British film legend, before the Dam Busters made him a household name, Richard Todd was a young lieutenant with a Sten gun in his hands, parachuting into the night sky over Normandy. As dawn broke on June 6, 1944, he landed among the first British soldiers on French soil, not as an actor playing a hero, but as the real thing. Richard Andrew Pallithorpe Todd was born in Dublin in 1919. His father, Andrew Todd, was a doctor and Irish rugby player who served in the British Army. Richard's childhood took him from Ireland to India and finally England. At Shrewsbury School, he trained for a military career at Sandhurst, but his heart was drawn to the stage. He left the academy for the Italia Conti School of Drama in London, a decision that strained his family and left deep scars. By 1939, Todd had co-founded the Dundee Repertory Theatre. But when war came, he put acting aside. He joined the British Army, and his real drama began. In 1941, Todd was commissioned into the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry. He narrowly survived a German bombing during training. 5 cadets were killed. He was thrown clear. That same night, the Café de Paris in London was destroyed in an air raid. He had tried to get a table there but couldn't. Fate had intervened twice in one day. Soon after, he joined the Parachute Regiment, seeking not safety but action. By late 1943, he was with the 7th Parachute Battalion of the 6th Airborne Division. His instructors wrote simply, "Cheerful, reliable, a fine example to his men." On the night of June 5, 1944, at Fairford Airfield, 600 paratroopers gathered in silence. Their chaplain, Captain Parry, nicknamed Pissy Percy the Parachuting Parson, led them in prayer before they sang "Onward Christian Soldiers." Just after midnight, Todd jumped into Normandy. His unit's mission, to reinforce the glider troops who had seized Pegasus Bridge and Ranville Bridge, vital crossings to stop German reinforcements. Landing safely, Todd fought alongside Major John Howard, the very man who had led the glider assault. Together, they held the bridge under fierce attack. His commander, Lieutenant Colonel Geoffrey Pine Coffin, stayed calm under fire. Todd recalled, "One sniper shot, and we simply kept walking." By June 11th, Todd was promoted to captain. For weeks, they defended the bridgehead through endless shelling and counterattacks. When the commandos of Lord Lovat arrived, led by bagpipes, Todd watched them march through his lines toward the beaches. It was a sight he never forgot. After Normandy, the 6th Airborne Division fought in the Ardennes, then moved to Palestine for peacekeeping duties. In 1946, Todd's jeep overturned, breaking both shoulders and leaving him concussed. He was flown home and demobilized soon after. Unsure of his future, Todd returned to the stage. His former agent, Robert Leonard, encouraged him back to Dundee, where he met actress Catherine Grant Bogle, his future wife. In 1949, Todd starred in The Hasty Heart opposite Ronald Reagan, earning an Oscar nomination for Best Actor and becoming Britain's favourite film star. Then came The Dam Busters, 1955. Playing Wing Commander Guy Gibson, Todd brought to the screen the courage he had lived himself. The film became the year's biggest British hit, and a symbol of national pride. In 1962, life completed a circle. Todd played Major John Howard in The Longest Day, the same man he had met and fought beside on D-Day. He even wore Howard's original helmet. Another actor portrayed Lieutenant Todd. Reality and cinema had finally merged. Throughout his life, Todd remained close to his comrades and to Normandy. He donated his D-Day equipment to the Café Gondry near Pegasus Bridge and supported veterans' charities for decades. In 1993, he was appointed an Officer of the Order of the British Empire. When he passed away on December 3, 2009, aged 90, veterans of the Parachute Regiment lined the streets for his memorial at St. Wolfram's Church in Grantham. Their banners fluttered in salute, a final farewell to one of their own. For Richard Todd, acting was never make-believe. It was an echo of the courage he carried into battle. He was, in every sense, a man who stepped from war into legend, and never stopped honouring the light he once found in the darkness. Before he became the third Doctor Who, before the Navy Lark made his voice famous across Britain, Jon Pertwee served in the Royal Navy, teaching commandos how to use compasses hidden inside brass buttons, maps cleverly woven into cotton handkerchiefs, and even everyday objects designed to help agents escape in times of danger. For 6 years during the Second World War, this future television star lived a life of secrecy and invention, working in close circles with those who inspired the stories of British intelligence. Jon Pertwee, John Devon Rowland Pertwee, was born on the 7th of July 1919 in Chelsea, London. His father, Rowland Pertwee, was a noted writer and actor, and the family name traced back to French Huguenot roots, de Perthuis de l'Elevaux. From an early age, Jean was spirited and rebellious. He was asked to leave several schools, including Sherborne, and even the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, after refusing to take part in an exercise he considered meaningless. Yet the outbreak of war in 1939 changed everything. He joined the Royal Navy as an ordinary seaman and was posted to HMS Hood, the pride of the British fleet. By his own account, he left the ship for training in early 1941. Only weeks later, HMS Hood was tragically lost in battle, an event that shocked the nation. Fate had spared him. Soon afterward, Pertwee became a young officer and was sent to HMS Valkyrie on the Isle of Man, training communications teams and producing light-hearted entertainment for his fellow servicemen. There he co-founded The Service Players, a drama group for service personnel that still exists today. His most unusual assignment came later, within naval intelligence. By his own recollection, he worked under the same command as Lieutenant Commander Ian Fleming, who would later create James Bond. Pertwee described teaching special units how to use clever escape equipment, from compasses in buttons to maps in handkerchiefs, practical tools designed to help soldiers find their way home. Although the official records remain limited, his stories reflect a resourceful young officer with imagination to spare. Somewhere along the way, after a lively night ashore, he awoke to discover a small cobra tattoo on his arm, a reminder of his adventurous years at sea. After 6 years of service, Pertwee returned to civilian life in 1945. At first, he was uncertain about his future, but soon the stage called him back. His gift for comedy and mimicry made him a natural for radio. By 1948, posters billed him as the most versatile voice in radio. Then came his breakthrough, The Navy Lark, which ran for almost 2 decades on the BBC. He played Chief Petty Officer Pertwee and several other roles, using his real-life naval experience to create humour that audiences adored. But in 1969, a new chapter began. Jon Pertwee was chosen as the third Doctor in Doctor Who. Producers told him to just play yourself. And that's exactly what he did. His Doctor was bold, inventive, and full of energy, a man of science and action working with UNIT to protect Earth. Between 1970 and 1974, he appeared in over 100 episodes, bringing charm, authority, and warmth to the character. He later returned for the 20th anniversary special, The Five Doctors, 1983, and the charity episode, Dimensions in Time, 1993. His era became one of the most celebrated in Doctor Who history, the Doctor as a gentleman adventurer with courage and heart. After leaving the series, Pertwee hosted the mystery show Whodunit, and later starred as Wurzel Gummidge, a talking scarecrow loved by children and adults alike. He revived the role in the late 1980s, earning affection from a new generation of fans. On the 20th of May 1996, while on holiday in Connecticut, Jon Pertwee passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 76. Tributes poured in from colleagues and admirers across the world. Actor Colin Baker said, "He was a man of such presence and stature. Of all the Doctors, his was the most sincere." Jon Pertwee's life was one of constant reinvention, from naval officer to secret instructor, from radio comedian to science fiction hero. Behind the laughter and the velvet capes was a man who truly served, a man whose imagination once helped commandos survive and later helped millions believe in the power of adventure. Jon Pertwee, the spy who became the Doctor. In September 1939, David Niven was enjoying Hollywood fame, filming the light-hearted adventure Raffles. When Britain declared war, he was awakened aboard a yacht in California and, without hesitation, made a choice few would have dared. He was going home to serve. While other British actors stayed safely in America, Niven packed his bags and returned to England. The cameras could wait, his country could not. Born in London on the 1st of March 1910, James David Graham Niven came from a long line of soldiers. His father served in the Berkshire Yeomanry during the Great War, and military service was woven into the family's story. Educated at Heatherdown and Stowe, Niven entered the Royal Military College Sandhurst in 1928, developing the poise and charm that later defined his screen presence. Commissioned into the Highland Light Infantry in 1930, he served in Malta for 2 years before civilian life began to call. After resigning his commission, Niven moved to the United States, working odd jobs before finding his place in Hollywood. By 1939, his performance in Wuthering Heights made him a star, just as Europe stood on the brink of war. When conflict erupted, Niven was quick to volunteer. He rejoined the British Army in 1940 as a lieutenant in the Rifle Brigade, soon transferring to the newly formed Commandos. At a rugged training base in the Scottish Highlands, he prepared for special operations work that required endurance, quick thinking, and complete secrecy. He later became part of the unit known as Phantom, a reconnaissance and communications regiment that operated close to the front lines, gathering information and relaying it directly to headquarters. Their work ensured that Allied commanders received the fastest and most accurate updates possible. Niven rose through the ranks, reaching the wartime rank of major and later temporary lieutenant colonel. Phantom patrols served in Africa, Italy, and Western Europe. During the Normandy campaign, they helped coordinate Allied movements, tracking friendly and enemy positions with precision. Drawing on his Hollywood skills, Niven contributed to one of the war's most imaginative deception plans, an operation in which an actor impersonated a senior commander to mislead opposing intelligence. His understanding of staging and detail made the disguise convincing. He also collaborated with the Army Film and Photographic Unit, appearing in morale-boosting films such as The First of the Few, 1942, and The Way Ahead, 1944, both created to strengthen public spirit and Allied unity. By the end of the war, Niven had earned respect not only as an officer, but as a professional who never sought attention for his service. He rarely discussed his experiences, saying simply that too many others had given more, and that silence was its own form of tribute. After returning to Hollywood, Niven resumed his career with renewed depth. He starred in A Matter of Life and Death, 1946, The Bishop's Wife, 1947, and Enchantment, 1948, films that captured both his charm and quiet strength. In 1958, he received the Academy Award for Best Actor for Separate Tables, further securing his legacy. Audiences saw authenticity in every uniform he wore on screen because he had truly lived those roles. He went on to play Phileas Fogg in Around the World in 80 Days, 1956, and even a playful version of James Bond in Casino Royale, 1967. Through it all, Niven remained quintessentially British, elegant, witty, and disciplined. In 1971, his memoir, The Moon's a Balloon, became an international bestseller. Within its pages, he reflected on friendship, courage, and the humour that sustained him through both war and fame. David Niven passed away peacefully in 1983, aged 73. He left behind more than a catalogue of films. He left an example of grace under pressure and loyalty without showmanship. When the world was at war, He did not play a hero. He became one. And when peace returned, he reminded millions that true bravery can live quietly behind a smile. David Niven, the Hollywood star who became a commando. To millions, Peter Butterworth was the gentle, bumbling comedian from the Carry On films, the man who made Britain laugh. But few knew that behind the humour was a hidden chapter of heroism. Lieutenant Peter Butterworth had once helped plan escapes from prisoner of war camps, forged identity papers, and even passed secret messages to British intelligence. He wasn't simply a comic actor, he was a man who never stopped resisting. Peter William Shorrocks Butterworth was born on the 4th of February 1915. Before the war, he had no thought of acting. He trained as a pilot in the Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm, flying Fairey Albacore torpedo aircraft in 1940. During a mission near the Dutch coast, his plane was forced down, and he was captured. It was the beginning of 5 difficult years as a prisoner of war, and the making of a remarkable spirit. Butterworth was first held at Dulag Luft near Frankfurt, but he refused to accept captivity. In June 1941, he and other prisoners dug a tunnel with simple spoons and managed to escape. He was free for 3 days before being recaptured, a setback that only strengthened his resolve. Transferred to Stalag Luft III in occupied Poland, Butterworth met fellow prisoner Talbot Rothwell, who would later write many carry-on scripts. Together they convinced their captors to let them run a small theatre to boost morale. Unbeknown to the guards, the shows also masked the sounds of tunnelling beneath the stage. Butterworth's performances were more than entertainment. They were acts of quiet defiance. He soon joined another legendary escape project, the Wooden Horse. Every day a vaulting horse was carried into the exercise yard. Prisoners pretended to practice gymnastics while hidden diggers extended a tunnel below. When the escape eventually succeeded, Butterworth's name was forever linked to one of the war's most ingenious plans. Ironically, years later, he was turned down for a role in the 1950 film adaptation. The casting director thought he looked too healthy to be convincing as a prisoner. But his most secret work was even more extraordinary. Declassified files from Britain's National Archives revealed that Butterworth served as a code letter writer for MI9, the War Office branch supporting escapes. Prisoners were allowed to write censored letters home, and Butterworth's contained hidden signals, small wording patterns that passed information about camp security and guard routines. These letters looked harmless to German censors, but carried vital intelligence to London. He never spoke of this after the war, and even his family learned the truth only decades later. Butterworth was also connected to preparations for the Great Escape in March 1944, helping forge documents and disguises for those involved. He was meant to be among the last to leave the tunnel but stayed behind, perhaps to continue his intelligence work. When the escape was discovered, he remained alive because he had not yet entered the tunnel. His decision, deliberate or not, saved his life. When Allied forces liberated Stalag Luft III in 1945, Butterworth returned home a quiet hero. He had endured years of imprisonment, dug tunnels, written coded letters, and performed comedy shows that hid resistance work. Now, unexpectedly, he had found a new purpose, making people laugh. Encouraged by Talbot Rothwell, he studied acting and began appearing on stage and screen. His film debut came in 1948, and a decade later he joined the Carry On series, beginning with Carry On Sergeant. Over 20 years he appeared in 16 Carry On comedies, as well as the popular BBC radio show The Navy Lark, alongside Jon Pertwee. Audiences saw a warm, clumsy, good-hearted man, never guessing that this kindness had been forged in the harshest of circumstances. Peter Butterworth passed away in 1979, aged 63. For most of his life, his wartime bravery remained unknown outside a few trusted friends. In 2024, newly released documents confirmed his secret intelligence role, and his family spoke with pride about the truth finally emerging. He never sought recognition. He never wrote a memoir or boasted of his service. He simply turned hardship into humour, proof that even in darkness, laughter can be an act of strength. Peter Butterworth, the prisoner who never stopped fighting. Before she was Holly Golightly, before she charmed the world as a princess in Roman Holiday, Audrey Hepburn was a frightened teenager in Nazi-occupied Holland, surviving hunger, loss and fear with nothing but courage and a dancer's grace. She never carried a weapon. She never wore a uniform. Yet, according to her own account, she fought her own quiet war, through kindness, movement and hope. Audrey Kathleen Ruston was born on the 4th of May, 1929 in Ixelles, Brussels. Her father, Joseph Ruston, was a British subject with Central European roots. Her mother, Baroness Ella van Heemstra, came from Dutch nobility. Audrey's early years were comfortable, divided between Belgium, England, and the Netherlands. But in 1935, her father left the family, a loss she would later describe as the most traumatic event of my life. When war approached, her mother moved them to Arnhem, believing the Netherlands would remain neutral. That hope was shattered in May 1940 when Germany invaded. Audrey was 11. During the occupation, the Hepburn family witnessed hardship and fear. Biographers note that her uncle, Otto van Limburg-Styrum, was executed by the occupiers in 1942 for acts of resistance, a tragedy that deeply affected the family. From that point, their sympathies shifted firmly against the regime. According to Hepburn's own recollections, she continued her ballet training under Winja Marova in Arnhem. She reportedly performed in Zwarte Avonden, secret black evenings, where curtains were drawn and audiences applauded only in silence. These underground performances were said to raise money for the Dutch resistance. "The best audience I ever had," she once recalled, "made not a sound." Some accounts suggest that Audrey also acted as a courier, hiding small notes or documents in her shoes when asked to help local resistance members. Because she spoke fluent English, she could understand Allied messages, though she was careful never to use the language publicly. In late 1944, after Operation Market Garden failed, the Netherlands faced a devastating famine. The railway strike ordered by the Dutch government in exile led to a blockade that cut off food and fuel. Audrey, now 15, endured what became known as the Hunger Winter. The Hunger Winter. She and her family survived on what they could find: turnips, wild greens and tulip bulbs ground into paste. Years later, she said she remembered baking little cakes from tulip bulbs that tasted of nothing at all. Malnutrition left her dangerously ill with anemia and severe weakness, effects she carried for life. Biographers link her famously slim frame to the long-term impact of this period. Audrey later said, "I have memories. More than once I was close to death." When Canadian forces liberated Arnhem in May 1945, Audrey was among those cheering in the streets. She described it as the most wonderful moment of my life. But freedom did not erase the scars of occupation. It took months for her health to recover, and her dreams of becoming a prima ballerina were fading. She moved to Amsterdam, training with Sonia Gaskell, then to London in 1948 to study at Ballet Rambert. However, the years of hunger had permanently limited her strength. As she later recalled, "I knew I would never be good enough." Still, those lessons in endurance would shape everything that followed. To support herself, Audrey took modelling jobs and small theatre parts. In 1951, she appeared in the British films Laughter in Paradise and The Lavender Hill Mob. While filming Monte Carlo Baby, she was spotted by the French novelist Colette, who insisted Audrey star in the Broadway production of Gigi. The performance was a sensation. 2 years later came Roman Holiday, 1953. Director William Wyler said he knew at once that she was extraordinary. Gregory Peck, her co-star, asked the studio to give her equal billing. The film earned her the Academy Award for Best Actress, the first of many milestones that included Sabrina, Funny Face, Breakfast at Tiffany's, My Fair Lady, and Wait Until Dark. Through it all, the resilience she had learned as a wartime teenager shone through. The grace the world admired was not only artistic, it was survival refined into elegance. In 1988, Hepburn became a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, devoting her final years to helping children in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. She often said her compassion came from her childhood experiences in Holland. "I have a broken heart. I saw what war did to children, and I can never forget." For her humanitarian service, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1992. She passed away peacefully in Switzerland on the 20th of January 1993, aged 63. Audrey Hepburn never led an army. She never fired a shot. Yet, in those silent blackout rooms, dancing for a cause she barely understood, she embodied quiet resistance. Audrey Hepburn, the ballerina in the shadows who became light for the world. Before he brought the gentle world of Born Free to life, before he became known for his tireless work with animals, Bill Travers was a young British officer who served during the Second World War. He witnessed hardship, courage, and survival, experiences that would shape his humanity and later his art. This is the story of how a man who once went to war became one of Britain's quiet voices for compassion. William Inglis Lyndon Travers was born in Newcastle upon Tyne in 1922 into a Scottish family. Educated in Durham, he considered a future in academia before volunteering for service when war broke out in 1939. According to several accounts, Travers was commissioned into the Scots Guards, one of Britain's most distinguished regiments. He trained as an armoured unit officer, a demanding post that required discipline and resilience. Travers reportedly served with the Guards' Armoured Division during the European campaign. His unit operated Churchill tanks, slow but powerful machines used to support advancing infantry across France and the Low Countries. Accounts describe long days of combat through the hedgerows of Normandy, heavy fire from German guns, and the relentless mud that turned every mile into a struggle. Like many who fought in those months, Travers lost close friends and carried the memory of that generation's courage for the rest of his life. Some later reports also suggest that, after Europe, he was redeployed to Southeast Asia, serving in operations related to the Chindits or with Force 136, Britain's wartime special operations executive in the Far East. While the exact details of his missions remain uncertain, what is known is that he served with distinction and was later recognized for bravery and leadership. Travers, like countless others, returned home changed. The war had shown him both the destruction humanity could cause and the extraordinary resilience of life. Friends later said that he rarely spoke of combat, but when he did, he spoke not of anger, only of a desire to protect and preserve. It was perhaps the seed of the compassion that would define the rest of his life. After demobilization, Travers chose a very different path. He studied acting at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, beginning a career on stage and screen. His early roles through the 1950s included historical dramas and adventure films, but in 1956 he starred in Bhawani Junction, based on a novel by his wartime acquaintance, John Masters. The film hinted at his growing interest in stories about humanity and freedom. In 1966, Travers and his wife, actress Virginia McKenna, starred in Born Free, the true story of conservationists George and Joy Adamson and the lioness Elsa. The film became a global success, moving audiences with its authenticity and warmth. Behind the camera, Travers developed a lifelong passion for wildlife protection. He later said that working with lions in their natural environment gave him a sense of peace he had not felt since the war. Together, Travers and McKenna founded Zoo Check, later renamed the Born Free Foundation, to campaign against keeping wild animals in captivity. They advocated for conservation, humane treatment, and respect for the natural world. Travers also appeared in other nature-based films such as Ring of Bright Water, 1969, An Elephant Called Slowly, 1969, and The Bellstone Fox, 1973, each reinforcing the message that humans and animals share one fragile planet. Reflection and legacy. Bill Travers passed away in 1994, aged 72. He left behind a legacy that stretched far beyond cinema, a legacy of compassion. Those who knew him said he had a quiet dignity, shaped by both the discipline of the guards and the serenity he later found among animals. He never sought fame for his wartime service, nor applause for his humanitarian work. But in every role he played, and every cause he championed, there was an unspoken lesson. That courage is not only found on battlefields, sometimes it is found in mercy. Bill Travers, the soldier who learned that strength can be gentle, and that the truest victories are those of the heart. Before he was Inspector Clouseau, before Dr. Strangelove, before he became one of the most versatile comedians of the 20th century, Peter Sellers was Airman Second Class in the Royal Air Force. He never flew a plane, yet it was during those years that he discovered the gift that would define his life: the power of laughter. Peter Richard Henry Sellers was born on the 8th of September 1925 in Southsea, Portsmouth, into a family of travelling entertainers. His parents, Bill Sellers and Agnes Peg Marks, both worked in British variety theatre, and Peter made his first stage appearance as an infant, carried on during a performance at the King's Theatre. School never held his attention. What fascinated him was voice, rhythm, and character. As a boy, he listened endlessly to BBC radio comedies such as Monday Night at 8, copying every accent and mannerism. A childhood friend recalled, Peter could hear a voice once and perform it perfectly. When war broke out in 1939, the theatre world, including Peter's parents, joined national touring groups to entertain troops. Peter left school at 14 and followed in their footsteps, drumming for local bands and variety acts. By 1943, shortly after turning 18, Sellers was called up for military service. Records show he joined the Royal Air Force as an Airman Second Class, the lowest enlisted rank. He had wanted to become a pilot, but his poor eyesight made that impossible. Instead, he began as a ground staff worker, maintaining equipment and assisting with aircraft servicing. It was hardly glamorous, but fate had other plans. Sellers auditioned for squadron leader Ralph Reeder's RAF gang show, a troupe created to lift morale among airmen through comedy, music, and sketches. Reeder had staged similar shows before the war and adapted them for the RAF. Peter's quick wit, mimicry, and musical timing won him a place instantly. From 1944 onwards, Sellers toured RAF stations across Britain, India, and Burma with the gang show. According to the Imperial War Museum, the troupe travelled through rough tropical conditions, performing in open-air camps and makeshift theatres. They carried scenery, costumes, and instruments through monsoon rains, bringing a few hours of joy to men serving far from home. Photographs and film reels show the young Sellers, uniform sleeves rolled up, tapping the drums or delivering rapid-fire impressions of officers and movie stars. He learned, night after night, how to read an audience, how to hold attention, how to improvise, how to make people forget fear for a moment. It was here that the future master of comic timing was truly born. Sellers left the RAF in 1946 after more than 3 years of service. He returned to Britain a changed young man, confident on stage and determined to make entertainment his life. He performed in small clubs, then on BBC Radio, where his voice work caught producers' attention. In 1951, he joined The Goon Show alongside Spike Milligan, Harry Seacombe, and Michael Bentine. Their anarchic humour revolutionised British comedy and inspired future generations, from Monty Python to modern satire. Sellers played dozens of voices, from pompous colonels to wheezing workmen, all drawing on the characters he had first met in wartime barracks and airfields. Through the 1950s and 60s, Sellers became a global star. I'm All Right Jack, the Pink Panther, and Dr. Strangelove revealed his astonishing range. But beneath the success, he often spoke of how much he had owed to his RAF years. The military discipline had sharpened his professionalism, the hardship had taught him empathy, and performing for exhausted soldiers had shown him that laughter could heal. Peter Sellers passed away in 1980, aged 54. He left behind a catalogue of performances unmatched in creativity and depth. Those who knew him said that, despite fame and fortune, part of him always remained that young airman standing under a tarpaulin stage in Burma, nervous, sweating, but determined to make people smile. War had taken many things from his generation. From Peter Sellers, it gave something rare, a voice that could make the world laugh again. Before the chase scenes, before the Benny Hill Show became a global phenomenon, Alfred Hawthorne Hill was an ordinary soldier with an extraordinary gift for laughter. As a young mechanic in the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, he manned searchlights through the blacked-out nights of wartime Europe, learning to find humour even when the world was dark. Alfred Hawthorne Hill was born on the 21st of January 1924 in Southampton, Hampshire. Both his father and grandfather had been circus clowns. Entertainment, it seemed, ran in the family's veins. At school, he showed little interest in academics, but had a sharp ear for mimicry and a love of music hall comedy. He idolized American performer Jack Benny, a name he would later adopt as his own. After leaving school, young Alfred worked a string of modest jobs, from milkman to bridge operator, and joined a touring revue as an assistant stage manager. He was shy off stage, but once the curtain rose, his natural timing began to shine. In 1942, at the age of 18, Hill was called up for national service. He joined the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, REME, a corps responsible for maintaining the vital machinery of war. Training was tough. Hill later joked that he was better at fixing jokes than fixing engines. Still, he endured the long drills, the rain, and the endless marching, developing a quiet respect for those around him. By late 1944, driver-mechanic Hill was posted to France with a light anti-aircraft searchlight battery. His unit landed via the Mulberry Harbours following D-Day, setting up along the Channel coast to help defend Allied positions from nighttime attacks. The skies above Normandy were alive with danger, not only from enemy aircraft but also from the dreaded V-1 flying bombs known to soldiers as doodlebugs. These pilotless weapons buzzed overhead before cutting out suddenly, falling to earth with devastating effect. Hill and his comrades worked through those anxious nights, sweeping the beams of their searchlights across the dark sky, ready to alert anti-aircraft crews. It was monotonous, nerve-wracking work, but Hill's humour kept spirits alive. He imitated officers, cracked gentle jokes, and discovered the strange camaraderie born of shared fear. As the war neared its end, Hill transferred to the Combined Services Entertainment Division, which organised shows for British troops. Here, he finally stepped fully onto the stage, performing sketches, songs, and light comedy. Among the audiences of weary soldiers and mechanics, Benny Hill found his purpose: to make people laugh when they needed it most. One of the officers who watched him perform would later become his first agent. Demobilized in 1945, Hill returned to a Britain eager for laughter but scarred by war. Encouraged by his wartime mentor, he tried professional comedy. Taking Benny from his idol Jack Benny, he began performing on radio. By 1947, he made his BBC radio debut on Variety Bandbox, coincidentally the same programme that launched Peter Sellers. Television soon beckoned. Hill's elastic expressions, lightning wordplay, and instinctive physical humour made him perfect for the new medium. In 1955, The Benny Hill Show premiered on the BBC, and British comedy changed forever. Hill wrote most of his material himself, a demanding task that blended music hall tradition with television parody. His characters were recognisable archetypes of British life: the bashful shop clerk, the pompous officer, the love-struck neighbour. Audiences adored him. At its peak in the early 1970s, The Benny Hill Show drew more than 20 million viewers and was sold to over 140 countries. Its blend of slapstick and pantomime made Hill an international icon. He also appeared in several major films, including Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines, 1965, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, 1968, and The Italian Job, 1969. In 1971, his novelty song, Ernie, the Fastest Milkman in the West, became a UK Christmas #1, proof that his comedic touch could reach beyond the screen. By the late 1980s, Hill's humour faced criticism for being out of step with changing times. When his long-running series ended in 1989, it marked the close of a golden era. Hill was deeply hurt, but remained proud of having made millions laugh without malice. He passed away in April 1992, aged 68. Behind the laughter was a man of solitude and humility, a craftsman who had spent a lifetime refining the art of timing. Years later, one veteran who had served in Normandy recalled, "Benny Hill made us laugh when we needed it most." That's something you never forget. From operating searchlights in wartime France to lighting up television screens around the world, Benny Hill's journey was one of transformation. He learned that even in darkness, humour could be a beacon, a reminder that laughter, like light, is a form of survival. Benny Hill, the searchlight operator who helped a nation smile again. Before the catchphrase, "Hello, my darlings," before the worker made him a household name, Charlie Drake was an RAF airman performing for weary troops in India. He was small in stature but vast in energy, a young man who discovered, amid the noise of war, that his greatest weapon was laughter. Charles Edward Springle was born on the 19th of June 1925 in South London's Elephant and Castle district. He grew up in deep poverty, one of 6 children in a family that often pawned household linens just to buy food. From an early age he worked paper rounds and odd jobs, helping to keep the family afloat. At 8, he got his first taste of the stage when he joined the chorus at the South London Palace, performing for a few shillings a week. The experience lit a spark that never faded. By his teens, he was working as an electrician's mate by day and performing comic songs in working men's clubs by night. Then came the war. Britain needed men, and in 1943, when Charlie turned 18, the Royal Air Force came calling. Drake enlisted in the RAF with hopes of becoming a pilot, but his small build and limited eyesight steered him toward ground service. There he met a tall airman named Jack Edwards, 6 feet 4 inches to Charlie's 5'1". Together they formed a musical duo, singing for their fellow servicemen at bases across Britain. Their commanding officer was amused but blunt, telling them, "You'll get further as comedians than as singers." It was advice they ignored at the time, but fate would soon prove him right. In 1944, Drake was posted overseas to India, where RAF entertainment units supported troops fighting in the Burma campaign. The climate was punishing: torrential monsoon rains, malaria, and the constant threat of air raids. Charlie and Jack performed wherever they were needed, at dusty airfields, hospital tents, and makeshift jungle stages. At first, they sang popular tunes, but Charlie's quick timing and expressive face began to draw bigger laughs than the songs themselves. He slipped on banana peels, exaggerated his size beside his towering partner, and filled every pause with comic invention. It was there, in the heat and uncertainty of war, that he realized his future wasn't in melody, it was in mirth. He later said that entertaining troops taught him everything he needed to know about timing, improvisation, and courage. In the darkest moments, laughter became survival. When the war ended in 1945, Drake returned home with Edwards. They both auditioned for London's famous Windmill Theatre, and both were rejected. Sitting outside on the curb, the pair decided to stop singing and start joking. They created a double act called Mick and Montmorency, the tall straight man and the tiny troublemaker. The contrast made audiences roar. By the early 1950s, they were appearing on BBC television, and soon after, Charlie adopted his mother's maiden name, Drake, as his stage identity. In 1957, Drake went solo with Drake's Progress and unveiled the greeting that would follow him forever. "Hello, my darlings." His exuberant, accident-prone persona soon became a fixture of British comedy. Then came The Charlie Drake Show, 1958 to 1967, a blend of slapstick and song that made him one of the most recognizable faces on television. He insisted on performing his own stunts, a commitment that nearly cost him his life. During a live 1961 broadcast, a repaired prop caused him to crash through a bookcase head first, fracturing his skull. He spent 3 days in a coma and 2 years recovering before triumphantly returning to the screen. In 1965, he launched The Worker, portraying a well-meaning laborer who never kept a job for long. Each episode ended in chaos and audiences adored it. At the same time, his novelty singles Splish Splash, 1958, and My Boomerang Won't Come Back, 1961, topped the charts on both sides of the Atlantic. In later life, Drake showed his dramatic side, earning praise for stage performances such as Harold Pinter's The Caretaker. But he never lost his affection for comedy or for the working-class audiences who had supported him since the RAF days. A stroke in 1995 ended his career, and he spent his final years at Brinsworth House, a retirement home for entertainers. He passed away peacefully on Christmas Eve 2006, aged 81. His longtime manager, Laurie Mansfield, said, "He was stubborn, fearless, and utterly devoted to his craft. Without him, there would have been no Frank Spencer. No Michael Crawford. Charlie Drake's journey began in poverty and passed through the jungles of war before reaching the bright lights of television. He learned, as many wartime entertainers did, that humour could lift men's hearts, even when hope seemed lost. For him, the RAF was more than military service. It was his first stage. And the lesson he carried home from India was one that defined his entire life. Laughter isn't just entertainment, it's survival. Before he became Hercule Poirot, before 2 Academy Awards and a lifetime of acclaim, Peter Ustinov was private in the Royal Sussex Regiment, a multilingual intellectual serving as Batman to Lieutenant Colonel David Niven, while secretly writing one of Britain's greatest wartime screenplays. This is the story of how a young soldier turned the chaos of war into art, and how those experiences shaped one of the most remarkable creative lives of the 20th century. Peter Alexander Ustinov was born in London on the 16th of April 1921 into a family unlike any other. His father, Jona Klopp von Ustinov, was a journalist of Russian and German descent who worked as a press officer at the German embassy before becoming a British citizen and secretly assisting MI5. His mother, Nadezhda Benoit, came from a distinguished Russian artistic family that included painters, architects, and ballet designers. Peter grew up surrounded by languages, Russian, French, Italian, German, and English, and by an awareness of world affairs far beyond his years. He once joked, "I am an international citizen, conceived in Russia, born in England, working in Hollywood, living in Switzerland, and touring the world." At Westminster School, he felt out of place among Britain's upper class and left at 16 to study drama under Michel Saint-Denis at the London Theatre Studio. By 18, he was acting in repertory theatre, writing his own plays, and performing multiple accents on stage, a foreshadowing of the mimicry that would later define his screen persona. Then, in 1942, came the call to military service. At 21, Ustinov joined the British Army as a private in the Royal Sussex Regiment. He later recalled that soldiering was not his natural gift. His humour, intellect, and clumsiness made him an unlikely recruit. He once said with characteristic irony, "However unpleasant compulsory soldiering may appear, there is always a proximity of humour." After several months of training and duties, his linguistic skills and theatrical background attracted the attention of the Army Film and Photographic Unit, the branch responsible for creating morale-boosting films and documenting the war. There, Ustinov met a man whose own story was already legendary, Lieutenant Colonel David Niven. By 1943, Niven was leading A Squadron of the GHQ Liaison Regiment, known as Phantom, while collaborating with the Army Film Unit on a project that would become The Way Ahead. He wanted Ustinov as his writing partner, but Army hierarchy made it impossible for a lieutenant colonel to spend long hours working alongside a private. Their solution was wonderfully absurd. Ustinov was officially appointed as Niven's Batman, or personal orderly, a servant charged with maintaining the officer's uniform and quarters. This technicality allowed the two men to meet freely, writing by day, polishing boots by night, and laughing about the contradictions of army life. Working alongside novelist Eric Ambler, Peter Ustinov co-wrote The Way Ahead, 1944, a warm, witty portrait of ordinary civilians transformed into soldiers under David Niven's command. Directed by Carol Reed, it became both a wartime inspiration and a cinematic classic. Ustinov even appeared on screen as an Italian cafe owner, bringing his trademark charm to the role. Beyond that film, he contributed to other morale projects like One of Our Aircraft is Missing and toured army camps with Ensa, using laughter and theatre to lift the spirits of weary troops. He never fought on the front lines, but his words became a different kind of weapon, one of hope. Demobilized in 1946, he returned to the stage, where his wartime discipline shaped his art. The Love of Four Colonels, 1951, made him a celebrated playwright, and the following decades saw him evolve into a true Renaissance man, actor, writer, director, linguist, and humanitarian. He earned 2 Academy Awards for Spartacus and Topkapi, embodied Hercule Poirot, and brought intelligence and warmth to every performance. As a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, he later carried that same humanity around the world, using humour to connect people across borders. Knighted in 1990, Sir Peter Ustinov summed up his life with characteristic wit. "I was the worst Batman in the British Army, but perhaps the best writer." For Private, the war was never about fighting. It was about understanding. And as he once said, comedy is simply a funny way of being serious. In 1940, Richard Greene was one of Hollywood's brightest young stars, handsome, charming, and just 22. At 20th Century Fox, his fan mail rivaled Tyrone Power's, and his future seemed limitless. But when Britain declared war on Germany, Greene did what few would dare. He gave it all up to serve his country. This is the story of a man who traded fame for duty and lived with that choice for the rest of his life. Born in Plymouth, Devon in 1918, Richard Marius Joseph Greene came from 4 generations of actors. He grew up surrounded by the theatre, left school at 16, and by 19 was performing in French Without Tears, the hit play that made him a London sensation. In 1938, he signed with 20th Century Fox, starring in The Little Princess, The Hound of the Baskervilles, and Stanley and Livingston. He was billed as Britain's answer to Robert Taylor, a true matinee idol. Then war arrived. When Britain entered the war, Greene left California and returned home to enlist. In 1940, he joined the 27th Lancers of the Royal Armoured Corps, a newly mechanized cavalry regiment. Starting as a trooper, he was soon selected for officer training at Sandhurst, where he proved a capable and disciplined leader. By 1944, he was promoted to captain, serving across Britain and Europe until illness forced his discharge later that year. During brief leaves, he appeared in morale films such as Flying Fortress, 1942, and The Yellow Canary, 1943. And toured army bases performing George Bernard Shaw's Arms and the Man, bringing wit and encouragement to fellow soldiers. Unlike many actors who served in entertainment units, Greene's main duty remained that of a combat officer. Discharged in 1944, Greene married actress Patricia Medina and tried to rebuild his career. But Hollywood had moved on. After years away, his name had faded, and he found himself in supporting roles, notably in Forever Amber, 1947. Throughout the late 1940s and early 1950s, he appeared in a string of swashbuckling adventure films, but success eluded him. His marriage ended in divorce in 1951, and his confidence faltered. Then, in 1955, television revived his career. Cast as the lead in The Adventures of Robin Hood, Greene became an international sensation. The series ran for 4 years and over 140 episodes, airing across the UK and America. Merchandise, comic books, and fan clubs made him one of the most recognizable faces of 1950s British television. He later said, "Kids love pageantry and adventure." Robin Hood gave them both, and gave me a second life. After Robin Hood, Greene withdrew from the spotlight, living quietly between Ireland and England with his second wife, Beatrice Summers. He returned occasionally to the screen, but never sought fame again. In his later years, he endured ill health following a fall and surgery for a brain tumour. He died on June 1, 1985, aged 66, his ashes scattered at sea. Richard Greene never became the Hollywood legend he was once promised to be, but he gained something far greater. He showed that integrity can outshine fame, and that courage doesn't only belong on the battlefield. As he once said, "There are more important things than being a movie star." For Richard Greene, honour was one of them. And though his fame faded, his story of service, sacrifice, and quiet dignity remains one of Britain's finest examples of grace under fire. Before he was Baron Rix of Whitehall, before his trousers famously fell down on live BBC television. Brian Rix was thousands of feet underground in the coal mines of Yorkshire. Not as a professional miner, but as one of Britain's Bevin boys, young men conscripted during the Second World War to keep the nation's coal supply alive. It is the story of a would-be actor who traded Shakespeare for a pickaxe, and how the darkness of the pits taught him the true meaning of laughter, compassion, and dignity. Brian Norman Roger Rix was born on the 27th of January 1924 in Cottingham, Yorkshire, into a comfortable shipping family. As a boy, he dreamed of cricket, not curtain calls, until his mother's amateur operatic society and his sister Sheila's success as an actress pulled him toward the stage. By 18, he had joined Donald Wolfett's Shakespeare Company and appeared in Twelfth Night in London's West End. Then came the war, and with it a different kind of performance. In 1943, Rix enlisted in the Royal Air Force, hoping to fly. Medical tests brought disappointment. He was ruled unfit for aircrew service. Determined to contribute, he volunteered for Ernest Bevin's new national service scheme, labouring in Britain's coal mines. The stage lights dimmed, and the lamps of the pits became his world. Assigned to the mines near Doncaster, Rix found himself working 12-hour shifts in airless tunnels, crawling through seams no higher than 2 feet. The heat was suffocating, the dust blackened his lungs, and every creak in the timbers carried a hint of danger. He later said that below ground, social class meant nothing, only the work you did, and the courage to keep doing it. Miners were wary of the Bevin boys at first, but Rix earned their respect through grit and humour. By day, he laboured in darkness. By night, he performed with the White Rose Players in Harrogate, keeping his love of the theatre alive. When the Bevin boy scheme ended in 1948, he swore he would never go underground again. He formed his own repertory companies around Yorkshire and in 1949 married the actress Elspeth Gray. A year later, he convinced London's Whitehall Theatre to stage Reluctant Heroes. Critics scoffed, but audiences loved it. The play ran for nearly 4 years and gave birth to the legendary Whitehall farces, fast-paced comedies like Dry Rot, Simple Spyman, and One for the Pot. His live television performances drew millions of viewers and made him one of the BBC's best-paid stars. In 1951, Brian and Elspeth welcomed their first child, Shelley. She was born with Down syndrome, a diagnosis poorly understood at the time. Doctors urged institutional care, but the couple refused. They kept their daughter at home and devoted themselves to her happiness. That decision sparked a lifelong mission. At the height of his career in 1980, Rix stepped away from acting to work full-time for MenCap, the UK charity supporting people with learning disabilities. He served as Secretary-General, then Chairman and President, and helped launch Let's Go, the BBC's first programme created for people with learning disabilities, presented alongside his daughter Louisa. Recognition followed. He was awarded the CBE in 1977, knighted in 1986, and made a life peer in 1992 as Baron Rix of Whitehall and Hornsey. He later became the first Chancellor of the University of East London and received numerous honorary degrees. In the House of Lords, he championed disability rights with wit and grace, always arguing that kindness was a form of justice. In his 90s, struggling with ill health, Lord Rix continued to speak for those without a voice. He died on the 20th of August, 2016, at the age of 92. MenCap called him a man who had changed Britain through compassion and persistence. Rix once said that his time in the mines taught him a simple truth, that every person has value, no matter what they can or cannot do. From Bevin boy to Baron, from the darkness of the coalface to the light of the stage and Parliament, Brian Rix proved that service and laughter can be acts of courage. His life was a performance for the people, and his greatest role was to show Britain how to care. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this journey through the lives of Britain's remarkable wartime actors, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories from history and cinema.